So, you want to hear what T51R sounds like? Let's try.
Hey, I've been with the boss for a minute, ayy. Looking at the cross for a minute, ayy. Spitting to the loss for a minute, with the sauce for a minute. In the stops, get a ticket, ayy. Living on the radar, knowing what the stakes are. Hey, hard black, you don't gotta play the race card. God play the judge, he ain't worried about the state bar.
Hi, I want to thank you for watching another one of our video installation series here from Remnant Performance. Today we'll be going over installation of the 65 Omega Turbo Kit for the Mark 5/A90 Supra. My name is Alec, I'm the owner of Remnant Performance, so I'll be walking you through a few things today. First off, we're going to go over a kit overview so you guys have a good feel for how the kit works, the key components in it, and how everything comes together. And then we'll go over removing the factory turbo, and then finally finish the video with the installation of the 65 Omega Turbo Kit. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right in to understanding the components of the 65 Omega Turbo Kit from Remnant Performance for the Mark 5/A90 Toyota Supra. All right, let's take a look at this turbo kit itself. Obviously, the big piece that's missing is the turbo, but don't worry, we'll go over that in just a few minutes. But I wanted to spend a couple of minutes now just talking about the kit components and why each of these are included so that you guys have a feel for it, know exactly what you're looking at, and whenever we mention it later in the video during the installation, you'll have an easy time of going through it and figuring out exactly what to do. So the kit's actually quite easy. First off, here is the air box. This is going to replace your factory air box and or any other air box you have that has come, that you purchased over time. The reason why we include that is because of the fact that everything has to be remade with the 65 Omega Turbo Kit. We can't utilize other existing technologies. And the reason is because the 65 Omega is the way it is. The turbo itself, and I'll show a picture right now. Here's a comparison picture of the 65 Omega versus the stock turbo off of a Gen 1 B58, which of course looks just like the 6-port off of the Mark 5 Supra. You can see there's a pretty big difference, obviously, in the physical nature of that turbo. So as you see, the inlet there is a 4-inch, and so because of that inlet size being larger, we cannot utilize the factory intake that was going to be used there in other kits, because if you try to do that, you will choke off the turbo, especially in high RPM. If it has a 4-inch inlet like the 65 Omega does, you have to have a 4-inch intake. So that's why the 65 Omega Turbo Kit includes the new 4-inch intake system. So this is their intake pipe number 2, the one that goes straight into here, into the air box. And this is intake pipe number 1. This is what actually connects to the turbo right here. I went ahead and actually attached the 4-inch coupler to the pipe already. So that's why we can't use the intake, the factory intake. Well, what about the factory charge pipe? Also can't reuse that either. Because the 65 Omega itself has a different connection. It's designed for a coupler connection versus the proprietary clip-on connection that is in these factory charge pipe or any of the other aftermarket charge pipes. So that's why you have this new charge pipe 1, and charge pipe 2. So because of not only the connection, but because of where the 65 Omega sits in the engine bay, we have to include a new charge pipe system for you. But we wanted to go ahead and give you guys a high quality replacement so that you could, if you already have invested in a charge pipe, you could get your money out of it by selling it to somebody else. Or some people, they maybe purchased a titanium secondary section. Well, our charge pipe number 2 here is pretty much exactly the same as anybody else's second section of charge pipe. So as long as it has a 3-inch intake here or inlet here and goes into the throttle body the same way and relatively shaped the same way, you should be able to reutilize your other charge pipe section there, second section, if you have one. But we wanted to go ahead with charge pipe 1. We sized up. It's a 2-inch here, 3-inch here. We sized up already so that we can use a straight 3-inch coupler from charge pipe 1 into charge pipe 2. This straight coupler allows us to adjust the length very easily depending on whether or not you're using a port injection plate or an intake manifold and need additional length. So whether it's kind of a factory length kind of area or an additional length, both are taken care of. The 65 Omega, because of the longer runners, and we'll talk about that here in a short second when we look at the actual turbo, it sits a little bit differently than in the factory setting. So we include a new billet turbo mounting bracket there as well too. So the 65 Omega turbo kit does not utilize the factory lines, so all the lines are replaced. So what you're going to see here is all of your new braided hoses to be able to take advantage of everything and be able to hook everything up. You're going to have an AN10 hose, just like this one. That's going to be for your oil return. You have an AN4 line for the oil feed, and 2 AN6 lines for your coolant connections. You can tell the two of them differently there apart because one of them has a straight fitting on the other end, and the other one has a 90. So the one with the straight fitting will show you when we go to install it where exactly that fits. Of course, in order to reutilize or to utilize the new AN lines, we have to include all these billet fittings here that adapt the standard fittings from the block to the AN connections. So obviously this is your oil return because it has an AN10. This one's the smallest, AN4, which is your oil feed. And then this one's in between, which is your AN6 on the back here for the coolant. Then the other side, we're gonna reutilize part of the factory hose. And so we have this right here for barbed fitting, 3/8 inch on this side to AN6 on this side. And then of course, you're gonna have an assortment of T-bolt clamps there for connecting all of your couplers. So with that done, an explanation of kind of why you need all these components in the kit, let's go ahead and start looking at the 65 Omega Turbo itself. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the turbo here in the 65 Omega Turbo Kit, which of course is the main draw. So anytime you get a Omega Series Turbo from Remnant Performance, of course it's gonna come in a box just like this. You're gonna go ahead and open it up. You're gonna remove the top layer of protective foam. You're gonna be met with this plastic bag, it says stop right there, and it's gonna have a syringe inside, right? So what this is telling you is that your new Remnant Performance Omega Series Turbo has been balanced at a minimum of 120,000 RPM. We do that in order to make sure that the performance and longevity is going to last on these units. For comparison, Borg-Warner, who is one of the biggest turbo manufacturers in the world, both in the factory turbo, in the actual Mark V Supra, and many other factory applications, and also aftermarket, they tend to balance their turbos at 100,000 RPMs. So we balance it extremely high to make sure that no matter what boost pressure you're making, the performance is where you need it to be, as well as the longevity. So you're going to use, basically what you're going to do here is you're going to take this syringe and you're going to fill it with oil. Once the turbo is installed in the location, you have hooked up the oil return line, etc., and you can make sure the oil can properly drain. Then you're going to use that to kind of pipette oil right into the top of the center section, the CHRA of the turbo. Okay, so we'll set that aside for right now. And let's go ahead and pull this out. Now that we have the turbo out of the packaging, we had set this apart, or set this aside momentarily just for a second earlier, but this is just a reminder again to properly oil the center section of the turbo. Because really what happens, although we balance everything as a full complete assembly at 120,000 RPMs at a minimum, this one was balanced at 131,000 here, you're going to have a situation obviously where the oil has drained during the testing, and so there's not going to be much oil in the center section of the turbo. So the only thing, which is great, the fact of the matter is your turbo has been tested at boost levels that are probably going to exceed what you're going to be ending up using, but you will need to make sure that you properly oil this before trying to turn the car on. So this is to get oil into the center section, and then you're still going to go ahead and properly prime your oil feed line through disconnecting the fuel capabilities of your vehicle, and then you're going ahead and kind of turning it over a few times to be able to push oil up through the line, and then get it into the oil feed port on the top. And then once that's done, you should have no problems at all with your Omega Series turbocharger. All right, so now specifically jumping in to the Mark V Supra application. So if we see the center section of this turbo, you can see it is not OEM, it is not stock at all. It is really, this is not a hybrid turbo at all. This is a complete full frame turbo that's just been stuffed in a modified version of a factory housing. So you can see straight up here, first up, you'll see that we have extended runners. They're an inch longer. It serves two purposes. One, it allows for much better top end potential and power performance, especially delivering horsepower in the upper RPM, especially when you start getting high horsepower application there. So that's going to be significant there for that. Also, the actual turbine housing section of it has been enlarged. The factory is about a 0.57 AR roughly. What we have hit here is about a 0.81 AR for the turbine housing section. So significant step up. It allows again for much better top end potential without sacrificing much in terms of spool. So you're going to have a similar bracket to this. Yours will probably be a little bit more cleaned up and stuff, but this bracket will be similar to what you end up having. So it's properly supported for the wastegate so that you won't have any situations where the wastegate can break from the bracket. The bracket will be very secure for your turbo application there for your Mark V Supra. So coming up around to the front, this unit has been equipped with T51R, has a 4-inch inlet. Coming in here has a 2-inch outlet there on 65 Omega. The 4-inch inlet, again, as mentioned earlier in the kit, we're going over the kit components. This is why we have to use such a large air intake, 4-inch intake there on the system to make sure that we don't choke this turbo out in terms of airflow in upper RPM, which will start to step up into high horsepower areas. So that's the overview of here. We've got the wastegate flap here. You can see at rest, when the wastegate is like this, it's still open just like stock. This will ensure that you don't have to do much, if any. You shouldn't have to do any adjustments at all to your wastegate through software. It should be able to hook up just like stock and be able to work for you. All right, so that's that. We'll get to the rest of that in a second. All right, so here's some of the components that you get with the 65 Omega. Obviously, your oil return line flange or oil drain flange, depending on who you talk to. You're gonna have a gasket for that. You're gonna have coolant connections, the bigger ones here, AN6, and then you're gonna have a couple of oil feed line connections. The difference between the two of those is one of them is gonna have a slightly smaller hole, pinhole in there. You can see there, that's one of them. The other one, this one has the smaller, and right here, you're gonna use the smaller one since the Supra has such a high pressure there on the oil feed line. Then this is gonna be your adjustable wastegate arm that's gonna go onto here and then connect you to the factory wastegate actuator. You're not gonna do any adjustments on the actuator itself. The only small adjustments you're gonna do is you're gonna rotate this and rotate this to make it tight so that ultimately your wastegate flap is straight up and down in line with the mounting point there for the turbo mounting bracket. And then that makes sure that that's connected to your wastegate actuator in that direction. That's it. So let's go over some of the specifics here on the turbocharger itself. It's a proprietary design, just like all of our Omega series are. So it has a 65.4 millimeter inducer on the compressor wheel, an 81 millimeter exducer, so the part that's spinning around in here, sending it out there. And then you have on the turbine wheel side, you have a 63 millimeter inducer and 58 millimeter exducer. So that sits just above our standard 62 Omega with the small standard turbine wheel. This one sits in between that and say like a G35 size turbine wheel. You know, through all the research that we've done, talking with Marin as well as others, and looking at lots of different dyno graphs, looks like the way that it was properly kind of sized there, at least Garrett had done that. A G30 type sized wheel is great for like a 2.5 liter application or so, as far as like Insta spool, and then like a G35 is like a 3.5. So we figured out found a way to create a proprietary wheel here that is kind of in between there to make sure that we properly utilize the 3 liter capability of a B58 and make sure that we can get its best spool up performance as well as without sacrificing top end performance capability on horsepower. So that's overview of the turbo itself. Oh yeah, forgot to mention here, the CHRA has ports on both sides, 2 ports on both sides for the coolant. You can put your coolant connections on either side, top, bottom, doesn't really matter. It's one big water jacket inside the middle. Up on top of here is where you're gonna pipe it in the oil right before connecting your oil feed fittings and going ahead and then doing the proper priming of the car. So without any further ado, I'm gonna spend just a second here talking about the last 2 components that we didn't go over in the actual kit. And that was on purpose, designed specifically because these are the only 2 pieces that are really changing between a 2-port and a 6-port 65 Omega turbo kit. So the 2-port, this is the heat shield for the 2-port, and here's the heat shield for the 6-port. These are the only there's only differences in the actual turbo kit itself. Everything else is the same, all the connections, all the piping, airbox, etc. So well, that gives you an overview of everything, and we will go ahead and start taking off the factory turbo on the Remnant Supra. All right, you can't start any work on a car before you talk about tools. So what tools do you actually need? So let's go over some of the tools that we will need during this process. So we will need obviously a creeper of some sort, or if you are you have a shop and you have your car up high enough, you can just walk under it. Obviously you wouldn't need that. But if not, something like that to be able to help you get through. And then you're gonna need a few different things as well too. So you're gonna need some kind of breaker bar. It's possible there's some bolts on there that may need a little bit of coaxing to help get them off. You might need an adapter. My breaker bar is a 1/2 inch drive, so I might need an adapter from 1/2 inch down to 3/8, which you'll need some sockets, various different sockets. You'll need 10 millimeter, 13 millimeter, 17 millimeter are the big ones. You'll also need an 8 millimeter, so you may need some additional adjustment or bits to be able to help you adapt that. Then you're going to need some Torx bits. You're going to need T30 and T20, T25 maybe as well too. So you're going to need some of these here. So you're going to want to make sure you have an assortment of Torx bits there to help you. I'd say, yeah, some units there to allow you some additional length there for a couple of these socket wrenches there that you want to use, whichever ones you have preference for. Probably want a 3/8 drive and a 1/4 inch drive, for your impact driver as well too. You're going to want a headlamp so you can see what you're doing in some of those tighter crevices there. And then you're going to want a small flathead and or pick tool that can allow you to get into some of those areas and removing springs, removing C-clamps, those kind of things like that. that are going to allow you to get things off the car. Anytime I'm working with fluids, I like the kind of disposable vinyl gloves there, just because you're going to inevitably get something on it, so it's easy to just throw those away. I also like these gloves as well. That way, if you have something where you're trying to wrench a bolt off there and you have a chance that you're going to have some pain in your fingers because you're going to accidentally punch something that you shouldn't punch while removing bolts, these help lessen that impact, and as well as, just, again, give you some additional grip on some items. I've already mentioned the impact. Last but not least, you're going to need, obviously, oil. I use Quaker State full synthetic. Please don't view this as a endorsement. I think it's great oil, but you use what you want to use. You're also going to need coolant and an oil filter, so because we're going to do an oil change during this process. All right, that's that. So let's go ahead and start the process of getting this turbo off the car. All right, it's time to go ahead and get started in removing the factory turbo. First things first, go ahead and get the trunk open. We are going to disconnect the battery. So going around to the back, we're gonna go ahead and lift up this rear plate. And once we get it situated here, get it up and over here so we can get to the battery. All right, so you can go ahead, you can disconnect the negative terminal, that works too as well. You can disconnect the positive, really either way works, but I'll go ahead and disconnect the negative. So, all right, you need a 10mm socket. Gonna do that. All right, and it's off. Go ahead and lay it down somewhere like that so it doesn't obviously reconnect, and close the circuit. All right, let's move to the front of the car. All right, now under the front here, under the hood, we're gonna go ahead and get all these things kind of out of the way. So let's make it real easy for us. We're gonna go ahead and get our strut bar here out of the way. We're gonna get the MST intake off the system here. We're gonna get the engine cover off, just so we have full access to everything. And then we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna get the charge pipe out and everything. So we're just gonna take it step by step. So first thing first, the way this is set up, this strut bar has to really be removed. So we're gonna go ahead and remove that real quick. So the way I have done this one here, I actually ended up tapping these towers here so that I don't have to do any, manual maneuvering underneath and try to put a nut on underneath there while trying to feed the bolt through the top. That's nonsense. So actually did it so that they're all the same. For me, these are 17 mils, so I'll go ahead and take those off. All right, now that that's off and out of the way, it's time to get the engine cover up. Real simple. If you guys are new to this, it's just held on by little clips underneath, so you're gonna pop it up. Unfortunately, the Varus on this thing is going to, in the oil cap cover, it's gonna come off when I try and pull this off as well too, but it's okay. Just kind of work your way around. You'll feel where it actually is attached. And then once you've got it, you can go ahead and pull it, and there you go, it's off. You can do this next part in different orders, but we need to get the air box out, either factory or aftermarket. In this case, the aftermarket air box out. We're gonna have to go ahead and also detach, because we're gonna have to pull the downpipe off. It's gonna make getting to the turbo a lot easier. We don't want to waste our time here as well. So let's go ahead, and first we're going to go ahead and you're going to pull these. We did this here in the Leviathan video as well too if you want more reference, but really simple. You go ahead and pull those clips up, then you can push on the back and then you can get the connectors out. If you remember from the Leviathan video, you're gonna need a little mini flathead to get up underneath here and push that off to the side, which will allow it to release and come off of that little clip. This is gonna make it really easy, so that way I can just drop the downpipe with the O2s being where they are and not have to completely detach them from the downpipe. Obviously, if you have a stock downpipe in your car and you're not replacing it with anything else during this process, then, you know, this, or if you are planning to replace it with something else, you still wanna do this step, but then of course, once it's out, you're gonna remove the O2s from the pipe. Since this is already the Leviathan system, we won't be taking those out. It's just about getting them off of the system. So we only had them clipped into the areas here in one area for this one. So very easy for us to go ahead and get that out of the system there. All right, cool, that's done. Now let's move over here. Time to get this intake system here out of the car. So real simple, just like everything else. You can pop that up, and now we can detach that. We're going to remove this sensor once it's out of the car. I don't want to do it right now because we'll take it and put it straight into the intake air pipe for the 65 Omega turbo kit system when we're ready to do that. But this right here, all we need to do for the MST system is right down there. And we're gonna go ahead and we can use this flathead or more efficiently use an actual socket. But I'm going to just go ahead, since I have this right here in my hand, loosen that, and then it'll allow me to pull the top half of this pipe right out. And voila, here comes the whole air box and everything all in one go. And set that off to the side. All right, so now we have the MST V1 system as well too, since this was actually retained. We're gonna go ahead, you can do two things. You can disconnect this hose all the way up here. I would say you don't need to, since it's gonna be reused. You go ahead and disconnect it from right here. And you're also gonna disconnect the wastegate actuator from right here as well too. So similar to everything else, pull the little tab up. You can use a flathead too as well if you need to. There you go. And then you're gonna also squeeze down and wiggle that off. There's that connector is off. That can now be ready to be removed. Then we're also gonna go over here and we're gonna pull this back into a spot here by using the flathead to pry that down. And now we can go ahead, once we've gotten it in the right spot, we can go ahead and detach that hose. All right. What you want to do is make sure that that little piece of metal retention thing goes into the little clip there, and it's going to allow you to pull it right back off. Okay, we're not going to go all the way yet right now because we have the pipe in the way, and there's also this little retention piece which we can remove later, but we don't need to worry about that right now. Now comes the little tricky part. You need to go ahead and squeeze on both sides of this and gently pry that unit off, hopefully without breaking it. So go ahead and go in here. And slowly remove it. I was able to miraculously get it off without breaking it. There's a little trick that you want to do. So as you're squeezing it with one hand, use a little flathead, get it right in between the little wedge, and you can kind of do this number and twist it up that way. That way you are allowing the flathead with the pressure up to be able to pry it up without having to try and yank it up, which is what people do when they break them a lot of times with that thing. It's not a super expensive part, but super annoying if you break it and then have to order one. It's like, I think $17, $20 part. It's not a big deal, but again, rather not break it if you don't have to. So Again, squeeze it and then use the small flathead. Just kind of get it right in there, and then right above where it sits right here. And then that way you can just kind of slowly twist it up while you're squeezing on the sides to make sure you're applying adequate pressure to release the clasping mechanism there. And then that way you can pry it straight up, and then it will come straight up if you have the right pressure on it without you having to yank or rip on it, which is how you break it. Again, don't be too crazy with it, but you also need to give it a good enough amount of pressure. Now, so that's released. So what I need to do now is to get this V1 pipe off of here, or the factory inlet if you have that as well too. So real simple, we get that retention mechanism out of the way, and we can pry it all the way off on both ends, and there we can get that pipe out of the way too as well. That way you can get to it a little bit easier. You can actually fully remove this. Just kind of make sure you hold on to it, don't lose it. You don't want it banging around in the engine bay if you can help it. There we go. It's off. Now I can go ahead and get the pipe out. Oh, I lost it, but it's thankfully still right there. Put that to the side. Reach down there. Got it. So if you do drop it, don't worry. You probably will be able to find it. Okay. Now we have to get the charge pipe out of the way too as well. We're going to disconnect this down on the bottom. And if you see down here, just like with the intake pipe, there is a little retention clip as well too. And we are going to try to pry that out of its slot. Yep, there you go. Straight out, boom, good to go. Drop it to the side. And now the charge pipe, assuming you have already released the little clip there for the radiator hose, you can go ahead and you can yank straight back towards the front of the car, and there it is. It's released off the front of the turbo. So now we got to just go up here. We got to take those screws out, the charge pipe, and then we can remove this whole system after going ahead and releasing these as well too. So same thing as all of the other ones. You can use a small little flathead if you want, or you use your nail and pull up on that little clip, and you're going to squeeze down, and they will release. All right, so we got those two off, and now it's just going to be going ahead and releasing that. You will need a Torx bit for that. On the Supras, you'll need a Torx T30. So I went ahead and set that up with a little wrench. You can go ahead, it doesn't take all that much. It's not on there incredibly tight. So you can back that out. T30, release those. Retain those screws. All right, so remove those. And now we're going to pull straight back. You're going to keep this gasket and transfer that over to your new charge pipe. Unless you have some crazy miles on yours. This car doesn't have that many miles, so we're just going to go ahead and reuse this. So now that we have it off, we'll just have to, if you have the factory charge pipe, I'm sure you've seen this, or if you've already replaced this before, it's always fun trying to just finagle it out of the nest of where it sits. Always fun to do with one hand too as well. But we'll go ahead and remove this and show you guys everything off. All right, with much finagling, charge pipe is out. Hate that thing, but it is what it is. Now that that's out, I'll never go back in this car again, so that's good. All right, so next up on the list, let's go ahead and get that downpipe off before we start disconnecting coolant hoses and oil hoses and stuff like that from this vehicle. So once we get the downpipe out, we'll be able to see everything and get to it a little bit more easily, especially from under the car. So let's go ahead and get this big V-band off. If you remember from the Leviathan video, if you've watched that, if not, you're gonna need a 13 mil socket wrench. So we'll go ahead and put that together. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna go right underneath, and let's see if I can show you here. Okay, see that nut right there, right at the bottom of the V-band, that's the one we're gonna be loosening. Once we get it sufficiently loose, we'll be able to basically pry this V-band up and onto the back of the turbo, and or put it on the downpipe actually, so that we can easily get it out. And what we'll do is we'll go back under the car and disconnect the Leviathan turbo back downpipe from down under there too, from the turbo back exhaust system. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, you can see here, go ahead and loosen it up enough that we can actually get it off of the V-band connection there and onto the back of the turbo. Now, what we're gonna go is go underneath the car, and we'll go ahead and loosen up that connection there between the Leviathan's downpipe and the rest of the cat back exhaust system. All right, we're under the car, and as you can see up here, there's the rest of the engine bay where we just were. The Leviathan has a 13 millimeter 4-inch V-band right here. So we're just gonna go ahead and get that off as well. All right, now the downpipe's off, out of the way. You can see everything a lot better. While we are under here, we are gonna be removing this tray as well too, but before we get there, I just want to show you a few things. So you see here, this is where one of your coolant hoses goes, right here, and you can see how there's a fitting that sits there attached to the block. Well, that fitting is replaced in the turbo kit, so that fitting goes from there and it turns into an AN6 male on the outside there, and you're going to be able to screw on your coolant line directly to the back of that fitting. All right, so now that you know how that coolant line is going to hook up, if you see right there, right underneath the mount, you see that little ribbed silver line there. That's your oil drain or oil return line. And see how there's actually another fitting there on the block that is also replaced with the turbo kit, and that's where the oil return line fitting is going to go. So once we have removed this plate, we will come back and we will start removing lines. And what I say before we do that, for the oil, we're going to go ahead and do an oil change, and so we'll go ahead and drain the oil from the car. That way it will just minimize, you know, what else is what's left in the system. That way we're really only dealing with coolant kind of draining down, and just, you know, make sure you're ready for that. So, all right, and let's go ahead and get started on removing this plate. All right, for the plate removal, you're gonna need a 17 mil. Go ahead and grab the impact driver for this, and you're also gonna need an 8 mil for the smaller bolts here, right? So we're gonna go ahead and use our impact to get these 17s and 8s off and get this plate off of it. All right, so starting with the 17s. There are a few of them that didn't want to come loose with the impact driver alone, which is pretty rare, but it happens sometimes. So what you're going to want to do is use the breaker bar that we talked about during the tools part of the video, right before this, to be able to break these off. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is going to go ahead first, switch to the quarter drive here on the impact driver for an 8mm, and we'll go ahead and get all these 8mm out of the way. That way we just grab the breaker bar one time, and then this plate is off. All right, grab the breaker bar, and my breaker bar has a 1/2 inch drive on it, so we did a 1/2 inch to 3/8 reducer for the 17, and then we just simply go ahead and apply the torque, and boom, there we go. Nice and easy. Just need to kind of break it loose. I'm not going to sit there and waste my time unscrewing it with this thing. It's really just to get that braking torque, and we'll go ahead and do that to all these ones. Breaking those. Go ahead and switch back over to impact. Quick removal. And then we'll be on to begin to drain the oil. All right, now that the panel's been removed, you can see we have much easier access there to the oil return or oil drain flange there, as well as coolant flanges and everything else that we needed to get to under here. So before we do that, like I said, let's go ahead. We're going to drain the oil here. I have a Femodo valve, thanks to Rob Halleck, my good friend. He actually convinced me to go ahead and invest in that, and it is nice. It's just really just moving this, and boom, the oil just comes straight out. So no, and it's nice and clipped on, so you don't have to worry about it. You just remove this plastic piece, and it's nice and sealed. So we'll go ahead and drain the oil here, and be ready there then to start taking everything else out. All right, so this is just for anybody who cares. Once you remove the little blue plastic there from the Femodo valve, real simple. You just go in here and push down, pull up, sorry, and then you just open it. And there you go. Drain straight in. Now, doesn't fly out at you. No crazy pressure. Straight there. Again, no tools. Really nice. If you care about it, I will actually include the link for the Femodo valve in the video description. All right, now that the oil has been drained from the engine, we are ready to go ahead and actually start getting this turbo out of the car. So there's just a few things we have to do here. Obviously, we're gonna have to hit these. These are 10mm on the 2-port, 10mm nuts there on these ones here. So we'll have to do a breakaway on that. Then we're gonna have to hit these down here, which are Torx bits. This is gonna be this one, if you can see that. This one right here, that is your oil feed. We got to get that fitting out of the block, and we're gonna just leave the oil lines in the turbo because we're not reusing any of these lines. And you know what we're gonna do here. You see the coolant line? We talked about that earlier. That coolant line fitting in the back there, that's got to come out. You can see it's also pinned to the block there, so we need to undo that as well, so that that whole line can come out. And then finally, for the other coolant line here, you can see it kind of snakes around the bottom here, and then it comes up and into this rubber hose. And that comes up under here to this system here. And so what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna undo it from right here. And then that way we can detach the whole rubber hose and pull the whole system out as one unit. That way, you know, we are gonna go ahead and adapt our AN line to this rubber line, but rather than try and finagle it around inside the car and try and cut it, or, you know, try and get this metal bracket off of it here with it inside the car, it doesn't make any sense to waste our time on doing that. Instead, let's just take the whole system out, and then that way Once we have undone everything here, and then finally on the bottom, we're gonna undo the turbo mounting bracket and get that whole system out. Once that's all done, and we get it all out of or everything detached, we can go ahead and pull the turbo straight out, and we'll get working on getting the 65 Omega in. So let's go ahead and start on the coolant line. Make sure you go ahead and open your coolant reservoir so it can efficiently drain there from the block. All right, so over here we are going to reuse our little flathead or a pick tool, whatever you have. We're going to get in here and we're going to carefully pull back and remove that little retention clip. There we go. Now that's out of place. Should be able to drop it free. I'd say one thing I forgot to mention in the tools part of the video is a little solo cup. This can help hopefully catch a little bit of the coolant. If not, worst case scenario, drops down on the ground. It is what it is. You'll clean it up, but that'll help. So I'll go ahead, since it is out here, I'll go ahead and remove that here with both hands and try and capture what I can. All right, so I was able to capture what I could. You know, got a good amount here. Of course, some fell down. I cleaned up what I could there with some paper towels, and I'll do a more thorough inspection when we actually get this thing out here, and then obviously cleaning up in time for the 65 Omega to go in. Now, if you follow that line, oh, one thing I would mention here, once you pop it off, of course it's gonna leak a little bit from here, but it's also gonna be in here. So what you're gonna wanna do with the line is just kind of bend it down and drop that coolant that you can into the cup. It'll just make it a little easier once you take the system off. Now, if you follow that line to where it turns into a hard line, you'll see that there you go, right there. It's pinned to the block. So what you're gonna wanna do, Torx T30, like a lot of the other stuff already so far. You can get in there and you're gonna break it loose. You're gonna take that one off, and then we're gonna go to the other side. For the other side, I just recommend going back underneath the car. It's just easy to get to. So come up here, Torx 30 again, and there. That's all it took to break it loose. Very simple, just like the other side. Then you're just gonna go through the process of getting that out. And while you're at it, go up to the other one here, feel your way to it, and there it is, and boop, broken. All right, so with that, once I get those out, those all coolant lines have been released. I'd say for this back piece here, go ahead and grab that cup again that you had when you go to release it, just so you can capture anything out the back here. All right, now that I've removed the two screws, then you're just gonna take a little flathead, get up underneath there, and use that to help pry it loose. Okay. So I'll come back to you, show you what it looks like. For this one, what you're gonna wanna do in order to get this released, once you've removed the screws, so you're gonna come up here and you're gonna start doing this, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And you can see it's backing out of the block. It's a pretty tight fit, but you'll be able to get it out, and then just grab the solo cup or whatever cup you got there, or bucket, and try and capture what you can. So I'll show you what that looks like here in a second. All right, that's what it looks like here. This one is going to be a big gush here of coolant, so make sure you have something like a bucket on hand. And I caught most of it, but unfortunately some spilled, so it is what it is. Now that the coolant lines are detached, we can go ahead, and what I'm gonna do is gonna take some paper towel,
I'm gonna stuff it right underneath here, right underneath the oil drain line. And then that way we can go ahead and disconnect the oil drain line. All right, for this one, it's actually somewhat easier from up top. Follow that line down, and you're gonna kind of find that spot there, the nut, follow it with your hand, and kind of guide it in. You're gonna wanna use an extra long extension there. And once you guide it in, there we go. You can, from there, go ahead and break it off as far as breaking the torque, all that's in there. All right, there you go. You do the same motion that you did for the coolant line, back and forth, and pop. There you go, it's out. Oil return line, again, this is a T30. Last but not least for the lines, we need to get the oil feed line, which is right over here. That's also T30. And so, I don't know if you guys can see that. Right there, yeah. So we'll go ahead and detach that. Also get that out of the block. And then we'll be ready to go ahead and hit these nuts as well as the turbo mounting bracket below. All right, remove the Torx head screw. You can see there, it's removed. Now all we need to do is remove this from the block. So similar, back and forth, back and forth. You can see it's broken back. We're just gonna ease it on back. Feel free to use a flathead on this as well too to get some additional leverage. All right, yeah, there you go. Oil feed line removed. So now all we have to do, these bolts and also the turbo mounting bracket, and we are good to go. So we'll start first with the turbo mounting bracket. What I'm gonna do is I'll slide this down here so you can see. All right, there was oil return, and there is the mounting bracket. If you see here, the mounting bracket is attached a couple of places here to the block. We're going to go ahead and detach it from the whole thing from the block like that. In order to detach the turbo mounting bracket, we're going to need a T40 socket here. This one's 3/8 drive. I went ahead and put an extension on it and put my nice Harbor Freight extendable socket wrench. So I'm going to go ahead, reach down under here, fish it down with my hand. Going to go ahead and feel for it. Follow along that, and I can actually get into it. All right, so I'm in. There we go, I'm in. So I'm gonna go ahead and actually use both hands here to take off both of those screws. Again, just feel your way along the bracket from up top here. If you have somebody underneath, you can do that as well too, that helps. That way you can help line it up. But you can definitely do it from up top. And so feel your way along that until you get to the back, and then you're gonna feel the actual T40 bolt there, put the socket in, and then go ahead and get them done. So we're gonna take both of those ones out of the block, and then we'll be going to the manifold. You can see there, both mounting bracket bolts have been removed. So we are good to go. So now, just need to go ahead and put a 10mm socket on and break these 6 nuts here loose on the manifold, and we will be able to get this entire turbo right out of this car. All right, 10mm on. Let's go ahead and break these off. Nice and easy. It's always good to have that extra leverage there with the extended handle. You may want to hit it with some PV Blaster or something like that if yours are really old and been on the car for a hot minute. But other than that, pretty straightforward. All right, okay, and removing the turbo, you may have one of the nuts that as it's coming on basically takes the stud out. No big deal, don't sweat that. But you can see down here, that's the only one that's left right now. I just kind of left a couple of threads on there. Everything else is out. So we are ready to remove the turbo as soon as we remove that last nut. So at that point, you're going to want to make sure that you have a good grip on things so that the turbo doesn't just fall. Make sure you got a supporting hand on that. Take your time, ease it back off. All right, I think, yeah, we're at that point now. So I'll go ahead and back it off by hand. Real slow, make sure I don't drop the turbo. All right. And with that, just kind of, there we go. There's the turbo. It's right off. So I'll go ahead, use two hands, pull this out, and we will be ready to start the process of putting the 65 Omega back in the car. As a quick note, I forgot to tell you guys about this. There is one last clip down here. I believe it's a heater connection. So what we're going to have to do, obviously, the same thing we've done on the other ones. Come in here with the flathead and then pry down that little tab and then get that one off. And then it can come out there. Thankfully, I realized it before trying to yank it out of the car. Just be better than me. Don't be like me. Make sure you take care of that before you try to remove it. All right, I'll go ahead and just detach that and get the turbo out of the car. Oh, by the way, when you're doing this, you're probably gonna have some more coolant / oil drip out of the turbo. Again, just be mentally prepared for that. It's gonna be a little bit of cleanup. It is what it is, but you'll get it out. Now that's a beautiful sight. So go ahead during this process, now that you've got the turbo out, you can go ahead and take a fine-tooth comb, clean things up. Any coolant that's laying on there, any oil that kind of got on the car, go ahead and kind of wipe it down. You'll get it clean underneath the car too as well. That way you'll be ready to go for the install. Now that the factory turbo is out of the car, you're going to want to lay it down on its side like this. And you're going to want to take a picture. And what you're specifically looking for is the orientation here of the wastegate flap here and the mounting bracket point on the actual turbine housing. I want to kind of see how they are in relation to each other. And that way you'll know when we go ahead and start swapping the wastegate, how to go ahead and orient it. So next you're gonna go ahead and grab your 65 Omega and you're gonna bring it out, and you're gonna also look in the turbo box that it comes in, and you're specifically gonna be looking for this unit here. This is gonna be your replacement arm there that allows for the connection between the wastegate actuator and the wastegate here on the 65 Omega. So what you're going to be doing here, now that you've taken your picture, once that is done, you'll be able to, next steps, go ahead and remove this wastegate actuator from here. In order to do that, you're going to need a T20 Torx bit and hit these 4 screws as well. You're also going to need your trusty flathead to be able to remove the C-clips. So in this case, you can leave the one on this side here because it's irrelevant. You only need to remove this one here. Do not touch the wastegate bracket here. Do not adjust anything here. There is no need to unscrew this at all. All you'll need to do is remove this C-clip and to get this arm off while you go ahead and unscrew the wastegate actuator from the bracket. So I'll go ahead, the T20, and start breaking that loose. It's really light. You don't have to put a lot of torque on it at all. As you can see, I'm just doing it with one hand. Not a big deal. Same thing on all of them. This breakaway torque is negligible. All right, so I'll go ahead and do that. And now that I've taken the picture, go ahead and do that. You can see there, you just kind of do a twisting motion. And you can get this. C-clip off. There we go. Make sure you don't lose it. Hold on to it. C-clip is off, so this can actually come off. There you go. And now we're just going to go ahead and finish removing this. Now that all 4 nuts have been bolts have been removed, you're going to need to be able to get this wastegate out. But in order to do that, you need to get this little guide bracket out. I found the best way to do that is to take a little hammer, choke up on it, and give it a few light love taps. That should help break it loose. If you have to do it a few more times, go ahead and do so. But you should be able to push this straight through and get it out. So I'll go ahead and do that right now and show you what that looks like. Yep, just give it a few more taps and then it gets a little loose. You can see it kind of breaking back and forth here. All you're gonna do is basically rock it back and forth, and you can see it protruding out of the recessed part right there. And if you rock it back and forth, you can get it to come out, and then we're gonna put it in here. This is what it should look like. See, it's out. There's that little bit. You can slide it right into here. And all you need to do is push hard on your side here, rock it back and forth a little bit, and boom, there you go. It's in. So now you got the guide bracket in there, and now you're just working to connect the 2 of these elements together. Now that the wastegate is in the relatively correct place, what you're going to do is not use the old wastegate bolts, because those won't work this time around. This new bracket comes with 4 new bolts. So you can go in here, you're going to remove this part here that we talked about earlier. I'm going to go ahead and get this part. These. So what you'll do, unscrew the nut on it, and then you're going to fish these through and actually use a Phillips head to screw them into place, and then you'll put the nut on the back as additional security. So I'll go ahead and do that right now. the way you put it in, you're going to line up the holes on the bracket. So of course this part is kind of facing down, and then you'll be good to go. So I'll go ahead and do this right now and attach this to the bracket. Okay, next you're going to take this piece, which is your adjustable bracket arm. Again, we do not touch the wastegate itself. We're going to use this arm to match the angle and length that we took in our picture of the factory turbo. So the way it looks, it's basically that this part sits right on the edge of the mounting bracket on the bottom. So I'm going to adjust and turn this to adjust the length to be able to match what we had there on that system. So I can go here, basically get that into the right angle. It was right about there-ish, and I'm pretty close. So at any rate, I will continue to just adjust until I get it to be where it should be, and then we'll be able to put this on, and then we'll tighten this down so it doesn't move. Looks to be right about here. That's where we need to be. This nice ball joint in this unit will make sure that there's very little chance of possible binding. You go ahead and put the C-clip back on onto the other side. Have to push a little harder. And then what we'll do is we'll come in here and we'll see that tiny little C-clip that'll go on this side. We'll go ahead and do that right now and show you what that looks like. Here is the assembly as it should be, with the wastegate actuator, with the C-clamp here and the C-clip here as well too. Both C-clips are in place, and that should be what it looks like. See, it's just about exactly what the factory one was before, so this should work very well. This we just ended up again, using Phillips head screwdriver. Just basically held this in place while we screwed that in, and it went ahead and actually tightened it nice and good for us. Everything is nice and secure. That's not going anywhere. It's not going to have any problems. All right, after we are done with the wastegate, we're going to now go ahead and finish setting up the rest of the turbo. So you see right here on the bottom, it's going to be your oil drain or return line flange. So you're going to actually go ahead and bolt up the prefabricated oil return line for this turbo. So what you'll see is something similar to this. Now obviously this is the prototype. Yours will be a little bit nicer looking, but this is the prototype to get you an idea of what you'll be looking at. So you're going to have an AN10 screw-on fitting here that we're going to put onto fitting that goes into the block, and this is the part here that is we're going to actually bolt up to the bottom of the turbo. In order to do that, you're going to have to kind of rotate 65 Omega up a little bit. You can use your knee or your other hand to support it, and that's basically where it's going to sit. But in order to do that, we need to go ahead and out of this package here, we grab the oil drain gasket, and we grab these two M8 125 by 20 millimeter Allen head screws that we're going to go ahead and set everything up here then on the bottom of the turbo. So let me go ahead and line everything up and then show you where we're going to be. Here's how it should look. Everything's lined up here. Gives you a good idea of what that looks like. You're going to take a hex 6 millimeter and use that to do the final tightening. It's a tight fit under there, so you may need to switch to an Allen key like that, and may even need to resort to like a needle nose pliers or something like that to give you the last tiny little bit of torque on those that one. But these are both on nice and securely now, so we can go ahead and start moving towards getting that bracket off of this turbo in order to take that bolt and then use it here with the new bracket. All right, to get that off, you need your Torx 40 again. Come in and you go ahead and break that torque. Once you've broken it, just go ahead and unscrew. Feel free to grab that washer as well. All right, you can leave it on, doesn't matter, because we're going to use our updated billet one. So obviously you have to rotate the turbo up a little bit again for this. Feel free to, if you're not having a little bit of trouble getting it on, just pry the opening up a little bit and you can get it on just fine. Should sit something like that. And you can go in and feed that in. And there you go. Hand tight is all you need for right now. One of the last things we're going to do here is going ahead and setting up our coolant lines to do that. Before we do that though, since now we have the mount in, we have the ability to go ahead and get our AN10 fitting for the block. What you're going to do here is you want it kind of oriented like this, and you're just going to go ahead and thread it on. Again, just finger tight. We'll do all the final tightening there once the turbo's on the car. But right now it just gets us in the right spot so we can kind of line it up when we go to install. All right, so that's pretty good. Still allows for the rotational ability there to dial it in on the car. But that's good to go. Now, AN6. This is our coolant fittings. There is one on this side and there's one on that side. So we're actually going to go ahead and pre-attach our coolant lines as well too. So again, it'll make it for an easy install. All right, back at the factory turbo, if we look over here at this coolant line, you're not going to be able to readily get this metal bracket or retaining clip off, basically, because it's actually one uniform unit that was, I guess, squeezed right into place. So what we're going to want to do is try and take a razor blade or, you know, scissors or some kind of knife, and we want to cut down straight into here, all the way down, and cut right as close as we can to right above that. And we're going to use that and then use this adapter fitting to AN6 to adapt this line so that we can clip it right back onto place where it used to be and run that coolant line to the new 65 Omega turbo. So what you're going to do, come in here, like I said, use a razor blade or some other blade and cut right here. There we go, we got all the way through. So now we're just going to remove it, and it should look something like that. Perfect. All right, now that you have the coolant line set up here and cut off of the factory turbo, you can go ahead and actually take this clamp that comes in the kit, and we're going to go ahead and put that onto the end here. There we go. Can snug it up a little bit. Perfect. And now what we're going to do is going to take that 3/8 to AN6 adapter, and we're going to push that into the hole, and then we're going to go ahead and tighten this down. So let me show you what that looks like when it's all fully assembled. There you go. It's all set up here. Now the only thing you do when you are putting this in, go ahead and make sure you're twisting as you're trying to feed that in through here. It'll just make it a little bit easier. Also try and make sure you back this out ever so slowly. Try and back it all the way out so you can have enough area to be able to get that barred fitting into it. Once that's there, you just come in here with your flathead and you can go ahead and start tightening it down. And once you're done with that, you have created your adapter fitting for AN6 to be able to give you your coolant there to the turbo. So we're going to go ahead and look and show you where on the block we have to add our fitting for the other side of the coolant connection. All right, we're back over by the car. And we have here our two fittings. You've got the small one, the AN4, which is your oil feed, and you got the larger one, AN6, which is coolant. So what we're going to start with is the feed there for the oil. And what we're gonna do, just like with all our other fittings, we're gonna go ahead, get yourself a little cap of oil if you have it already. Just do a little dab. Kind of wipe off any excess. You really don't need that much. We just want to make sure that we don't just put a completely dry O-ring, trying to stuff that into the block. It's usually not a great deal. So this one goes right down there. So we're gonna go ahead and try and line that up. And so I can show it at the same time. And you're just gonna kind of rock it back and forth. And it will go in. There you go. Perfect. So it's in there. All you need to do is just rotate it a little bit, line it up with the hole, and then take back one of your old Torx head screws that you had used for the original fittings and put them back into place. So we're just gonna go ahead and re-screw that in there. Perfect. We'll tighten that up in a second. Before we do that, let's go ahead and get the coolant fitting. You see over there, right next to the other side of that gasket. So same thing, repeat the same process. Get a little smidge of oil. I need a little bit more here. All right. And for the coolant fitting, it's easier to just come underneath the car. We're gonna orient it much the same way. And again, kind of rock back and forth, and then it'll go into the spot. Yeah, get it real close. There we go. Got it. Nice tight fit. Yeah, and that's why you want to make sure you have some oil on that O-ring, or you could lose an O-ring. So then we take our last Torx head here, and go ahead and thread that back into the block as well. And that's how it should look. Since we're already under the car, let's go ahead and tighten this coolant fitting first. We need our Torx T30. So come up in here and get in there. Remember, they weren't that tight to begin with, so you don't need to like absolutely kill them. A little hand tighten, it's good enough. We'll go ahead and jump up to the top and do the oil feed. All right, up top, let's go ahead and get that oil feed. All right, nice and tight. So oil feed and coolant over there. So now you see there's one obviously still down there for the oil drain, but remember that's on the bottom of the turbo with the oil return line, so we'll get that when we put the turbo in. So yeah, as of right now, everything's pretty much set up. So we can right now go ahead and get the coolant line to attach back to the bottom where it's supposed to. So let's go grab that. All right, we got the coolant hose that we set up, nice and tight, ready to go. So simple, just push it up, boom, and all we gotta do is come back around here and push that little clip. Oh, look at that, nice and secure. In the words of Hannibal, I love it when a plan comes together. I know I probably dated myself for some of you guys, but go A-team. Anyway, now that's set up here for us. We are
in business. So let's go back over the turbo, finish setting it up, and let's get that bad boy in here. You can really do this in any order you want, but I figured I'd show the oil drain. We obviously need to take out the filter and swap it. So it's a 32 millimeter socket there on the top of this oil filter housing, and you can go ahead, and I already loosened it up. So now it's just a matter of taking it out. Go ahead, as you're taking it out, let's try and make sure it drains. And ever so slightly take it out with trying to touch as few things as possible, which is pretty much impossible, but we do our best. All right, you got your filter here. You're gonna need a flathead. Get underneath here, this O-ring, and you need to release that O-ring from the housing. Before you remove the filter, make note that the fact that it's the top piece up here has that extra O-ring here that creates the seal. So you want to make sure you orient your new filter that way. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the filter, and I'll show you guys. I use these Wix filters, WL10342. They're readily available at my O'Reilly local to me. So that helps. Once you got it, put the new O-ring back on, the housing. You can go ahead and get it set up. Make sure the O-ring's in the slot it's supposed to go in. Put the new filter in, make sure that O-ring's on the top and that you get a little oil on it. Bring it back up and put it back. Real simple.
This is a 4AN fitting. We're showing you this fitting because it's something people often get wrong, and not many people have encountered this type of fitting before. Unlike most fittings where tighter is usually better, that is not the case for an AN fitting, because it has this domed end that seals with a domed interior on the fitting. It may be hard to see in the camera, but these shapes are matched on the male and female fittings. So tightening one of these takes very little force. And the first thing you want to do is you want to get the female fitting finger tight. That's it. That's step one. And the next thing you want to do is you want to imagine that this is a clock, right? That this is 12 o'clock directly up and down. And to tighten the fitting, all you have to do is with a wrench, turn it to the 3 o'clock position, right? It's 45-degree turn. So another way to think about it is if this flat of the fitting is straight up, you just want it to end on the side. And that's all it takes to tighten any size AN fitting. All you have to do is turn it 45 degrees past finger tight, and it will not leak and it will not back out. If you tighten it more, it will damage this domed fitting on the inside, and it will no longer seal correctly and start leaking on you. There are ways to fix that, but it's better just to avoid it. So make sure you don't go very hard on the wrench with an AN fitting.
Back over by the turbo, the last major thing we have to do here is hooking up coolant lines. So if you look at the coolant lines, they are both different. They both have a 90 on one end, but one end has a straight and the other is also a 90. And obviously the double 90 is a longer line. So here's how you hook them up. You have one front, one back. Your straight, the one with the straight fitting, that was going to go on this one. The one with the double 90 is going to go on the back side. So let's start with the one that's on the front. As with all AN fittings, as we talked about before, a little bit of oil is the best thing you can do. Not everybody does it, but it's technically what it calls for. Don't have to get crazy on this, just a little bit of a application on some of the threads. Then you can go in here, grab the coolant line with the straight,
and hand thread it on first, then we'll tighten it down. All right, once you've got it all hand tightened, it's real simple. Take your adjustable wrench and you're just gonna give it basically a half turn, not even. So once it starts really moving like that, that's pretty much as tight as you need. All right, let's flip the turbo over and go to the other side. All right, for the sake of time, went ahead and tighten this one. You want basically both your coolant lines in a, since the turbo is sitting up like this, both in a downward orientation. And once you have that, this one's kind of down at a little bit of an angle, obviously to get around the oil return line, then you are good to go. You can go ahead and proceed in putting this on to the car. All right, so what we have right here, we have the turbo ready to go. We're gonna go ahead and just kind of reroute our lines down, and we're gonna make sure when we put it in, make sure the compressor housing goes in front of the block. Otherwise, you will not be able to fit it. So right in front of the block, turn it, there you go. Drops right into place. So now what we need to do is kind of get the turbo right in the slot and kind of route the lines as they're going. All right, perfect. So if you see down here, you'll see the oil, the coolant line that is on the back needs to go underneath the engine mount and come out the back here, right? So that's what you have to do. The other one is gonna kind of come down here and go over to the side, so you're good. So we'll go ahead, move the turbo into relative position, and you can go ahead and line it up and get it at least somewhat on there. You're gonna wanna go ahead, grab one of your nuts, and just kind of lightly thread it on there a few, so the turbo won't move out on you. Perfect. All right, now we gotta go underneath the car and get the oil return line in place. All right, we're underneath, and you can see here the oil return line is basically exactly where you need it to be. Just need to kind of fish it up a little bit, line it up with the hole, and there you go. It's in the slot. So, as always, make sure you got a little oil on the O-ring, and then you can push it into place. But yeah, make sure your coolant line here is ready to go. You can go ahead while you're under, fish it around and underneath the mount and get it on. Go ahead and hand tighten it on. I put a little oil on that earlier, so you're good to go. Perfect. That coolant line is good to go. Out of the way, now we just need to get the oil return line to sit straight into the block. As you can see, it's almost all the way in. We're just doing the same thing that we did before, where we're grabbing the hose and just kind of rocking it back and forth, trying to get it to go into the block. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that real quick, and I'll show you what it looks like once it's fully in there. All right, as you can see, the fitting is in the block. Like I said, same technique. All we did is reach in there, and you're just kind of rocking it back and forth to get it to slide past the O-ring and then into the block. So now that that's there, you can see that there's a misalignment there of the eyelet there for the where it sits into the block. So all we need to do is realign that, twist it down, and then we're in business. All right, so if you have a problem where the flange itself over here is slightly off from the bolt hole, take a flathead, come in around the back here, and put it straight into the hole. And then from there, you can pry down, stick your other hand through here and pry down on it and rotate the flange down into the right position. So now it's lined up correctly. And now what we're gonna go ahead and do is we'll go ahead and put that bolt into the hole so that it's secure, and then we'll be ready to go. All right. In order to get to that bolt on the flange, you need to make sure that the hose clamps are in the downward orientation. Otherwise, they'll get in the way when you're trying to come around the back with the T30 and hit that T30 bolt. So then, once you have it in place, everything set up, then you go back on from top of the car and just make sure you wrench down the AN fitting nice and tight. All right, once that's in place, you can go back to these fittings here and retighten them, and you'll be good to go. All right, one thing I wanted to mention here too before we go top side and actually fully bolt the turbo to the block. You're going to want to make sure that this coolant line actually goes underneath, and we actually had it wrong earlier in the video, underneath the oil drain line. The reason is, it's kind of hard to see, but the actual AN fitting, that 90 degree, there's a slot right there in the block where that will fit 100% and not ever run into anything. It's close without it. Like if you try to go over top, probably will work, but we don't want to run into the issue of any kind of vibration and hits it. I mean, turbo shouldn't really move on the block, obviously, because it's bolted on the top and also the turbo mounting bracket. But at any rate, this puts it in the slot there, which is great because it has basically an inch of room between the fitting and the block once the turbo is fully put on there. So you'll never have an issue. So going underneath is what you want to do. Now, if you accidentally put it over top like we did there, don't worry. If you just take your time and snake the line, release it from the back here, coolant line, and snake it over top of the oil drain line, snake it over top, and then just kind of slowly pull it through. You won't have a problem with it. Actually, you won't kink the hose. You'll be able to get it through without kinking the hose and, damaging it. You'll be able to do that. This is exactly what we did here. I didn't have to remove the turbo or anything like that. Just basically snaked it through there, didn't have to release anything, and just basically pushed this fitting backwards, so it's angled more towards the front of the car. So yeah, very simple. Just go over the top and just kind of snake it through, and I was able to get it back underneath, no problem, and then reattach back up here. So very simple. If you run into the issue that we just did, don't worry, your life isn't over. It's not the worst thing in the world. Very simple, easy fix, and you're back in business. Okay, so now let's go up top and let's focus on bolting the turbo to the block properly. All right, back up top, and now that we have everything kind of focused in the right direction and we've got the coolant lines heading in the right direction and in the right slots, we have no issues in general. Obviously, you see this coolant line's kind of sitting where the charge pipe is. Don't worry about that. We're going to go ahead and take care of that here shortly. But before we do that, we need to get this this turbo fully onto the block. So let's go ahead, grab all the nuts that you had there, and this one, obviously, when we had it earlier, the stud came out with it. So let's go ahead, kind of fish it on there, and make sure that your turbo mounting bracket is generally pointing towards the block from underneath, but it should be already. And we're just gonna kind of go ahead and get everything situated here. And once we do, we'll get to actually tightening it all on the block. We'll start inner, work our way out. Right. Cool, everything's working in there. Okay, those two inners are kind of finger tight, hand tight right now. We'll go diagonal, get the ones on the bottom first that are on the outside corners, and then switch to the ones up top. All right, to be clear, starting off with the inners, once you got those two in, holding it up against the block, then move to the diagonals here, and then that one over there, and then back up top here, top there, right? So we're basically rounding home here. Okay, pretty much got everything snugged up against here. Just gonna kind of go through here now and just make sure they're all snug. We'll torque them down in a second. All right. So next thing we're gonna do is, all right, everything's on up top, and I said we'd go ahead and torque the thing down. Well, the torque specs for the turbo to the block are 13 foot-pounds, very, very low. I mean, it's really, you choke up on the socket wrench and you just kind of hand tighten that thing. It's not much. Please don't go and you know, crank that thing down, because it's possible you can warp the gaskets, right? So you just want it nice and snug up in there. Don't go crazy. It's the same thing if you see down in there. We're gonna go ahead and put the bolts in for the turbo mounting bracket, and those are 14 foot-pounds. So 13 here, 14 down there, basically same thing. So it's just a matter of just getting it nice and snug, and that's it. Once that's in there, then we're ready to start putting on charge pipe. After the charge pipe, then we'll go ahead and put in the intake piping, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, and we'll go ahead and actually, since the oil drain line is on, we will go ahead and pipette some oil in there, spin the turbo a little bit, get it kind of primed before we prime the oil feed line, which we'll also be putting in here shortly as well. So just gotta get a few things in, oil feed line, get it in, get the charge pipes in, etc., and then we should be good to go. So going to mount the turbo mounting bracket to the engine suit, you're going to want to come in underneath the bottom, and you can actually see the bolts right there. I kind of hand threaded them in there first, and now you can actually just take socket wrench with the T40, and you can route it around, and you can line it up. Hard to do with one hand, but you can route it out the back here, and you can get it so it lines up straight with those bolts. If you do it right, you'll be able to just go ahead and bolt it on from the bottom here. And again, it's 14 foot-pounds on all three, including the one that is on the turbo. You're gonna just want to, again, that one right there, you're gonna just want to come in on that one there and just tighten that down a little bit once you've gotten the other two in place. Well, that's it. Just, again, hand tight, and that's all you need. All right, we are pretty much ready to go ahead and finalize a few things. But before we do that, I'm gonna go underneath the car and I'm gonna show you guys this. One thing I didn't mention was the thermal tape that comes with the kit. You guys are gonna get a roll of this. You're gonna use this here specifically on the back coolant line there, on a few places there, just again to ensure that you're not gonna have any issues there with thermals in relation to the downpipe there. And then also you can use this specifically in adding a little bit of padding to the line anywhere that it's a possibility that it could possibly rub up against the block or something. So this can be used here to protect the line as well too in relation to that. So we'll go underneath the car. You're gonna wanna make sure you bring a scissors as well too, so you can kind of measure it out in a way that works for you as you're going through the process of wrapping it. Okay, looking at this here, we have our AN6 coolant hose. You can see really the only place that it kind of possibility bumps up against, it's not even really a rub, is this area here. So what we'll probably do is, the best thing to do is go ahead and wrap this area down through here. This is going to allow, you know, again, thermal management in relation to the downpipe that's going to come from here, and it's going to ultimately come down to here. So it's really kind of out of the way, but still, we'll go ahead and get some thermal tape on there. Then in addition, underneath here, it does not rub against the oil drain, but still, we'll go ahead and give a little bit of wrap right in that area to ensure we don't run into any issues. So let's go ahead, we'll take the tape and, you know, cut off piece by piece and just wrap it here. It's very sticky, so you can go ahead and start wrapping, wrap down here. And you can go ahead for this part, obviously, since we haven't really fully tightened it yet, we'll just go ahead and release it from the block. That way we kind of get a good feel for it, and it's a little bit easier to wrap when it's not attached to the fitting. Okay, cut off this small section here, and this is what we're going to use here to wrap this section back here, right where it goes right around the oil drain fitting. Okay, just going to take this, peel off the backing, and then wrap it around there. All right, now that we've wrapped it all, let's go ahead and we'll route this back up. And again, assuming we already put the oil on the threads, we'll proceed with hand tightening of the AN fitting. Get it as basically as tight as you can on your hand. And then from there, now all you're going to do is take your adjustable wrench, and it's like literally a quarter turn. It's very, very minute. Come around the back side so you can more easily see. That's about it. It's all you need there. Quarter turn. All right, now everything should be good to go. You've got the thermal shielding up through the area where the downpipe was going to be close. You've got a little bit of extra tape on that, so we should have some good protection all the way through, and we're ready to go topside. All right, let's get charge pipe 1 into the car. So what we're going to want to do is take our 2-inch to 2¼ inch coupler, and we're actually going to go ahead and put that coupler on here. It's going to go quite a bit in there. I'll show you a picture right now of how close the charge pipe sits to the compressor housing. As you can see here, that's kind of how far we need to really push this in. So let's go ahead and do that, because I'll need 2 hands, and I'll show you what that looks like. It's definitely a tight fit, which is great. Should mean that you shouldn't have really any problems of it popping off. You're going to want to go ahead and push the pipe in till just before it kind of hits that bend. What you're also going to want to do is make sure that you get the right angle with the coupler coming up. See that? So it's basically the slightly opposite angle to what is how the pipe is going to go, because it's going to sit in the bay like that, coming down, and it's going to hit the bottom of the turbo like that. So it needs to be slightly off at an angle. And don't worry, it's going to take probably a couple of tries to get it right. You go, you put it on, you test fit, you see if you can get it up on the compressor housing, and make sure it lines up properly, and just test and repeat until you get it right. The way you want to put it in is just like this. Coming in here and kind of curl that back. You can get underneath there. Should be able to wiggle it in there pretty easily, and it drops down into kind of where you want it to be. Super easy to get down there without having to butt up a bunch of things. And then you just basically use both hands to route it onto the compressor housing. Once you've gotten the fitment dialed in terms of the actual charge pipe number 1, real simple. Go ahead and put this T-bolt, sorry, it may have had to unbolt this that's okay. You can take it unbolted completely and just clamp it back on once it's in place. And then you're gonna put that one over it. And then you're gonna basically put this right back on the compressor housing for the final time. And you want it to be inside here, because those will be much easier to get to than on the outside. And then we'll go ahead and put that into place and show you what that looks like. We talked about before, charge pipe 1 is in. We're gonna go ahead and tighten the T-bolts here shortly to get that right, but everything lines up exactly where we were talking about. So now let's talk about charge pipe 2. So here's where we have the factory charge pipe. You're gonna reuse this gasket. So you're gonna go ahead and take your little flathead and you're gonna come in at an angle there. You should be able to pry it right out, boom. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna transfer that over to the charge pipe. So charge pipe 2, and we're going ahead and putting that O-ring gasket right back in, boom, ready to go. So now this, you can go ahead and attach the 3-inch coupler to it that comes in the kit. And between that and getting yourself your T-bolts, you'll be ready to put it in. All right, so we have the 3-inch coupler on. We have our 2 T-bolt clamps that are 3-inch, and we did not put the sensors in yet because we are gonna do that after, once this is on. So we're gonna go ahead and line it all up. It's good to have a second hand here to be able to hold charge pipe 1 in place as you guide the assembly on. And then you're just gonna basically wiggle the couplers into place and get it all set up so that you have a good overlap in both areas. Then you're gonna rotate the clamps upwards and we're gonna tighten them. So I'll show you what that looks like here in a second. All right, so yes, you want to make sure your couplers are here. You want to make sure your T-bolts are on the inside here. You obviously can't get to them from back there. You'll have problems. So make sure that they're facing this way with this orientation. Good to go. All right, now we're going to go ahead and put the bolts back in here for the throttle body and holding the charge pipe together in that assembly. So that's it. You're going to use your T30 Torx bit again and reverse back what we did, taking off the factory one. And then once that's in place, we'll proceed in going ahead and actually moving the sensors from the factory charge pipe into this one.
Okay. Hey, my name's Robert with Remnant Performance, one of the partner companies to Remnant Performance, and I just want to show you the charge pipe fully assembled on the A90 Supra. I'm here helping Remnant Performance finish up the install. With the couplers in place, down at the compressor housing, the 2 charge pipes, and at the throttle body, you can shake the whole motor. This is extremely solid. This is going to hold a ton of boost. People have been using multi-ply couplers for years. This is a great solution. Very, very solid.
Awesome. You're now going to go ahead and remove these sensors. And so this one here and that one of them, this is just going to be unscrewing that one. It's really easy. You unscrew that and get it out. And then this one is going to be a T25 Torx bit. So once you break it, you can break the torque and you can transfer them over here to charge pipe number 2, sitting here on the car. So this sensor right here is your throttle inlet pressure sensor, and this is your IAT sensor, intake air temperature sensor. So just so you know what they are as we go ahead and remove them. And for sake of time, we're gonna go ahead and remove them and put them straight in on the other pipes there so you guys can see what it looks like fully assembled. All right, for this temperature sensor, you're probably gonna need something like this to be able to grab it. Just gonna grab it real light there. You don't need to crush it or anything, and just kind of ease it on in. Don't want to crush it again. Very light pressure. You don't want to be out there trying to strip it or anything like that. And once you get down to the gasket, you're really kind of in place. But that's that. All right, so we can go ahead and push it down a little bit more, but it's really, at that point, it's pretty sealed.
Okay, this is the throttle inlet pressure sensor. It goes in the charge pipe. This is the screw that comes with the car. It's a very strangely threaded screw. We're not going to use this on the charge pipe. Instead, you're going to replace it with a standard M6 by 1 millimeter threaded bolt. And this is a snug fit. This orange O-ring is a snug fit. So you'll have to give it some pressure and then you'll feel it snap into place. And you may be able to hear that on the video as well.
Just for your own information, of course, as with all rubber O-rings, we already pre-lubed that one just off screen. So you go ahead and lube that up if you haven't, and there you go. See, it's gonna be in the same location And then we're gonna put the M610 in, and we'll come back and show you guys what it looks like fully assembled.
To tighten it down,
Yeah.
it's easiest just to use a ratcheting 10mm wrench.
Yeah.
One thing a lot of charge pipes for the A90 Supra get wrong is the angle of these sensors. There is sort of a reference design that a lot of aftermarket charge pipes use, and it's quite difficult to plug in the IAT and the throttle sensor because it runs into all of these different wire looms, and some of them even have you cut this zip tie up on top of the engine to move these harnesses around. This charge pipe has the correct angles for all the sensors, so you can just easily plug these in exactly the length of the wire harness from the car.
Okay, as you're doing the final prep here on the turbo, you're going to look in your turbo box. You're going to see two of these fittings. They're restrictor fittings for the oil. The Supra has an extremely high oil pressure, so you're going to want to get the smaller of the two holes. And if you look real close, you can see that one is indeed it's a little bit smaller than the other. So the one on the bottom is bigger, so you're going to want to use the one on the top. And you're going to go ahead and Teflon the bottom section. You can tell the bottom section because one, it's not domed. That's an AN4 dome, so you can tell that that's the one you keep up. That's the one that goes into the turbo. So that's, you go ahead and Teflon those threads, and before we screw it in, we're actually going to go down to the turbo and we're going to actually get some oil in there first. If you remember, when we talked about this earlier, when we did the turbo overview, when you open the turbo, remember this was on there right on top. So if you remember what it says it ultimately talks about how the turbo has been balanced, and that balance has happened at a minimum of 120,000 RPMs. Again, for longevity, make sure you can hit the boost that you need to, again, and it lasts as long as you want it to. So the big thing is obviously making sure that you get enough oil in here. So what this does is it includes, again, this syringe. It prescribes giving it 5 to 7 milliliters of oil from the top into that port right there. And you know, that's going to allow you, again, to get the oil right into the turbo as you're doing it. As you can see, we pulled off the front here. You're just going to kind of rotate from the front nut here, rotate the turbo around so that it can just coat that whole dual ceramic ball bearing system inside the CHRA and be ready to go. So we'll go ahead and show that here and go grab some oil and show you what that looks like. All right, here we have about 7 to 8 milliliters. And go down, go right in the top here, right where it is, and just slowly push that in. As you're doing that, reach down, kind of turn, and you can even feel how easy the turbo turns with a little bit of oil added.
It's important to go slow when you're doing this. The cartridge in the center of the turbo has pretty tight tolerances, so the oil doesn't feed through the turbo all that quickly at syringe pressure. So don't blast the oil in there or else it's going to spill on the turbo itself and it makes a mess. So just go slow, take your time.
Exactly.
So when you're screwing in the oil feed line fitting into the top of the turbo, there isn't much clearance up against the engine block. So you need to cobble together something with a flexible head. You can either use a wobble socket if you have one of those, or we just use a normal universal joint. This is a 3/8 wrench with a 14 millimeter deep well socket with a long extender, and that's enough to easily reach the fitting. And there's no torque spec for this, but it bottoms out once it's fully tight. So when it doesn't tighten anymore, you're good.
Yep. Awesome.
When the fitting is fully tightened, you'll notice that there's a smooth bronze collar showing in the camera below the 14 millimeter hex. You want that flush with the top of the turbo. There's no gap in that smooth part and the top of the turbo, and that's how you know it's fully seated. Make sure before you put this fitting in, you have 4 revolutions of Teflon tape around the fitting. It's very important that you Teflon this fitting to make sure that it doesn't leak oil. If you don't put Teflon on it, it will leak oil, and that may cause a fire problem. So please make sure you put Teflon tape on it.
All right, for hooking up the oil feed line, you're going to end up with a 28-inch AN4 oil feed line. So you're going to know it because it's going to be the smallest line diameter-wise out of all the ones that you get. And then it's going to have a 90-degree fitting right on one side here and a 90-degree fitting on the other. So what you're going to do is take the 90-degree, run it over here. You're going to run it over top of the wastegate here. You're going to go ahead and wrap that part of the line there. It's going to give us additional protection for it. Then you're going to go ahead and use a little zip tie, but we think we're probably going to have a little bit of a clip here in the final design here for the mount to be able just to hold that out of the way. Then you run your line from there, and you're going to run it underneath, down here underneath the charge pipe, and it's going to come back up here and then go into that fitting, 90-degree into the fitting right there in the block, right? So that's all you're going to do. Connect it right here, again, using the regular AN technique, oil on the threads, finger tight, and then, of course, a quarter turn on both things. So that's how you hook up your oil feed line to your turbo. All right, so next up we have intake pipe number 1, right? So we went ahead and took the 4-inch coupler, straight coupler, and we pushed it on. It's gonna be a tight fit. Don't lose hope because it's a little bit flared beyond 4-inch, and that's fine. If anything, you can just kind of put a little bit of lube on the inside of the coupler if you're having real trouble, but you can come in at an angle and kind of twist it and you'll get it on. It will be some work, but you'll get it on. It'll be nice and tight, won't come off. We're gonna get our T-bolt clamps to be able to put in here and on the turbo. And then when we do that, we're gonna come in here and slide it straight on. So let's go grab the T-bolt clamps so that they're ready to go so that we don't have to remove this again. All right, so we went ahead and used the worm gear clamp in this regard that was normally coming with a filter. We used that instead because we'll just use a T-bolt on this because it's a little bit bigger of a fitting here, and that's fine. But here's a regular 108 to 116 4-inch T-bolt. Now what you want to do is kind of angle it in, and you're going to see it. Go ahead and wiggle it right onto the front. Easy peasy. And with the T-bolt being where it is right there, we can have easy access to get there. And the 10mm nut, and we'll be able to tighten that down. Now, before you go and tighten that down, because it's going to get stuck on there, you're going to want to go ahead and connect your fittings. Well, how do you get it connect? Well, you're going to have to turn it a little bit, and then you're going to get this thing in, and once it's in, you push until you get over the ridge, and it should do a little click. There we go. There's a little click. All right, so if you do find, and I'm gonna go ahead and use this little tip, we talked about it earlier when taking apart everything, but if you have an issue with this crankcase vent right here, and you're trying to get it off, you squeeze. You don't have to squeeze that hard. Then take a flathead, come in right there on the side, and just rotate the flathead up. All right, you'll see that it starts to move it without you having to do much. And what you'll do, come in there. You can do the same thing on the other side. And there you go. Once you have it like that, you should be able to use a flathead to pry it up. And out. All right, now that you have that in place, we're gonna kind of fit that back up again. Kind of route that next to the block, and that'll get you right back where you were. And now, we're gonna take our PCV, and we're gonna go ahead and slowly rotate until it allows us to take that as well. And this should also click into place. There we go. All right, everything is in place. Intake pipe number 1 is here. We have everything clipped on both for our PCV and our crankcase vent connection down there. So if you see down there, everything is good to go. So everything is nice and clipped in place. And now it's just a matter of putting on this coupler and also first getting that air box in place. So what we're gonna do with the air box is we're gonna bring it over and we're gonna actually proceed to get the top of it off so that we can secure it in this space here and also underneath here. And once that's done, we'll finish routing out the coupler and everything there. And also, while we're at the process of doing that, now that we have the intake pipe in place, now is a good time to go ahead and hook up our connection for AN6 coolant that we did on this coolant connection back earlier in the video. So real simple, just make sure you line it up and righty-tighty. Super easy to even do it just one hand. And there you go, tightened there, and then we're just gonna do our typical fashion and get it to go get a full tight. All right, the next piece was putting on the coupler. Found the best way to do that, 2 hands coming on the inside here and just kind of fishing it over. You want to kind of come on the interior lip here of the pipe, go over that, and then push on the outside here, on the inside here, so that it can go over the lip. And then once you get it on, you just kind of snug it down because this one is not moving since we tightened it down. Once you're in that place, you've got a good overall situation here. You're just gonna, pull the coolant line out for a second there just to make sure you can fit it. But yeah, everything's in there. It doesn't rub on anything. It's hooked up the way it should. And now next, we're gonna go ahead and install the air box before we install the last intercooler pipe. And when we do that intercooler pipe, we got to go back over to our old one and remove the intake sensor. And we pull that over and put it into the pipe, and we should be good to go. All right, first things first, when you go to install the air box, you're going to take your old OEM rubber mount and you are going to put it into that spot there, that little notch. Push it, push it, push it, and boom, it's good. All right, once that's notched, you're gonna end up reusing that when I'll show you when we get the box lid off, how that works. So looking at the box itself, you're gonna use an Allen head 3mm to be able to take the screws out of here. And the screws have a backing nut. Such a low torque, you can just hold on to the nut with your fingers as you get it released. So let's go ahead and get all these released here and get the lid off so we can properly install the box. In order to get these out, you just take a flathead and pop them up, and then it'll come straight up like this.
This one right here. Flat under the friction fit twist.
Nice.
And you can just pull out the pin, and if it doesn't come with it, you can slip the flathead under the edge and pull the rest of the way out.
Nice. All right, before you go ahead and put in the air box, obviously as you saw we just did, we went ahead and released everything here, so it's nice and flapping, ready to go. But last thing you're gonna do, go ahead and actually hook up your wastegate actuator. So you're gonna use the same harness, go back and clip it into place on the same PCV connection that it used to be on. The only thing that's missing now is the heater. So take a zip tie and zip tie it out of the way. So it's now not in the way of anything. Now that this is on, we are ready to go ahead and work on installing the actual air box. Go ahead and actually take a 13mm and remove this bolt from its location so that we can actually put down the box. It's going to be under a lot of tension, so we'll show you how that looks here in a second. All right, when you first put on this piece here, obviously it's going to be brand new. It's designed to be able to crush down. It's going to be 10mm high. Don't worry, as you go and you're just going to have one arm kind of holding this back in place towards the fender there, and then you're going to go ahead and actually thread this on. As you thread it on, you can use a regular socket wrench, You're gonna crush it down, and it's actually gonna bend this bracket down properly. It's gonna create a nice seal down in the bottom against the intake inlet pipe down there. So it's gonna have a nice seal against that, and it's gonna hold it in place in the back. So that's why you want it to have, again, that nice crush effect. And once that's done, and you put back in all your little tabs, it's gonna sit nice and flush like it used to there on stock. When it comes to the air box, and you're trying to go ahead and secure this mount, once you've put the rubber mount in, you're gonna take this bolt and this nut. And you're gonna come in from the bottom with the bolt, feed it through until the top here, and then you're gonna come with the nut on top and go ahead and put them together like that. Then of course you tighten down until it's nice and secure and snug, and ultimately holding everything against both the frame here and also the front as well. And that's how you secure the airbox. All right, guys, Rob and I are here finagling this thing. Not gonna lie, this airbox is going to suck.
This part's gonna suck.
Yeah.
Just get ready.
It's really, really tight. It's a very tight fit. It's really good to have two people, one kind of fishing this on, the other person fishing this in, holding this you know, whole system up, and just kind of working with the coupler, working the pipe into it. It is gonna be tight. It's gonna work. It's gonna work. It fits, but it's gonna be tight. So just as long as you know going into it that that's gonna be some work on your part, yes, you'll be okay. And, you know, feel free to go ahead and loosen this up. It'll give you a little bit more playroom as you're kind of working the system together, but you should be able to feed that pipe, this pipe deep into there. You're gonna go ahead and release the, you know, sensor from there. And that sensor, what's that sensor again?
That is the mass airflow.
Mass airflow sensor, that's right, mass
Like
airflow sensor.
There's a mass airflow sensor on the Supra.
And what it is you're gonna use a Torx T20 to get that out of the pipe there, whether that's the factory or obviously in this case aftermarket. And then you're going to actually come in here and you're gonna drop it into the pipe. Now, the interesting thing is you can actually drop it in upside down on mistake. And if you drop it in upside down, you're like, wait, these bolt holes are way off. This thing's terrible. No, it's fine. It's just upside down. Make sure that little, you know, QR code looking thing is facing down. And when you do that, boom, everything lines up. And what you're gonna do is this actual pipe comes with these new screws. They're M2 Allen head. And you're gonna come in there and you're gonna use that to put that into the pipe. So when you go to put that in, just note that it is a 2.5 metric. Very weird, but 2.5 is the size of Allen that you're gonna use.
And at this small of a size for Allen key, it may not fit quite snugly. So like be gentle with the Allen key.
Yeah.
And these bolts don't have a torque spec, but there is a locking washer behind it. So get it tight enough and you'll be fine.
Yeah, it'll be all right. All right, folks, everything is pretty much done now. We are just finishing tightening up the downpipe here, and then we're gonna come back to this V-band here and put that back on the Leviathan. And right now, Rob is up top reconnecting the O2s. And once that's done, we'll kind of pop back under the hood. Obviously, we will have to fill the car with coolant, fill the car with oil, but then should be able to start up. One optional part of the kit is installation here of the heat shield. It's a nice unit. This is the 2-port, obviously. There's a 6-port version as well. But the heat shield goes obviously over the turbine housing. So the way to get to it, if you come down here, you'll see that there are 2 bolts right here, one here and one over here, which you can better see right now. Those are accessed with 13mm socket. You can take those out. And then you're gonna go ahead and use these spacers that come with it to then put in that bolts there with this spacer. You slide the heat shield down and it goes sit right there. You'll have to just kind of be a little patient with it as you get it down to the right spot. And then it'll sit right there over your wastegate. And then the spacer will hold it off like this. So you have a nice little space there in between, and then you just re-drive your bolts back through, and it will cover the turbine housing quite nicely and keep a little bit of heat out of the immediate area here in the engine bay. Again, this is optional. If you want to run it, you can. If not, it's not going to stop you from running the kit, but I just want to highlight that and how it's done there for the installation. All right, we are finishing up adding the oil to this baby. We're about to load the tune file from Marin Tuned, aka the Wizard. And once you add our coolant, we'll be ready to start this up.
Okay, when you disconnect some fittings off the block to install the turbo, you're going to lose coolant from the block, which means you're going to have to refill the coolant system and bleed it of air so it performs efficiently. So what we're going to do is we're going to bleed and fill the hot side system, the hot side coolant system. And you can tell you're working with a hot side system because it's the one that has this bleeder screw on top of the tank. So to start, you're going to take a large flathead screwdriver and release the bleeder screw, righty tighty, lefty loosey, until you see a slot visible in the thread. You do not have to take the bleeder screw all the way out. Then you're going to take the cap off and fill this reservoir with new coolant until it starts to dribble out of the bleeder valve. When you see coolant come out of this valve, you can just close the bleeder, put the cap back on, and you're ready to start the bleeding process. And we'll put the steps on screen because it's much easier than listening to it. Follow those steps. It'll take about 15 minutes for the car to do it automatically, and you'll be good to go. You'll have one bled coolant system. Before you start up your turbo, you've already put oil into it, but it's always good to prime the oiling system to make sure that all the hoses and the turbo itself are filled with oil. And the way to do that is to crank the car without actually firing the injectors or the spark plugs. You don't want the car to start. So the way to do that is to pull off the ECU cover. It just pops off. It has these little rubber grommets and plastic feet here. And this is your ECU. This is the DME on the car. And what you're gonna do is this last connector on the back, all you're gonna do is unplug this, and it has these special clips that hold it into place, and we'll get a close-up with better lighting on how to remove this connector. But you want this connector disconnected to crank the car, and to actually prime the turbo, all you have to do is let the engine crank for 5 to 10 seconds, 3 times in a row with this connector disconnected, and then you can put everything back together, put the cover back on, and you're good to start. As a close-up of how to remove an ECU connector, you take a flat blade screwdriver and gently push down on this tab right here. And when the tab is depressed, you can pull back this clip and it actually starts to push the connector out and it comes right out. All of the DME connectors work just like this. And when you reinsert the connector, the lever starts to come back on its own. And when you hear that click, you're fully reconnected. So we're going to do that on the back connector so we can prime the turbo on the car. Another note on removing these connectors, they are angled into the DME, so you may need to remove the first 5 plugs to get to the back and then restore them in order, and then take them all back out to plug in the last connector and then put them all back.
Yeah.
Kind of a pain in the butt because of the way that they're angled, but that's just probably what you're going to have to do. And as we click into our last connector here, that's what we just finished doing.
Perfect. Last but not least, before we go ahead and do our priming, obviously our battery is disconnected. So we're gonna come back in here from back in the earlier part of the video and make sure our negative terminal is reattached.
Actually, at this point, you can go ahead and use a 10 mil and actually tighten it back because you're not going to take it off again.
One thing you want to be careful of when you're plugging the DME connectors back in is that it's possible to have this lever snapped into the right place, but the connector not fully seated. If you try to start your car and it doesn't turn over, you don't hear any cranking, it's probably because one of these are loose. So just disconnect all of them, push them down firmly from the shoulder of the connector here, and then put the lever in. Make sure you can't feel any up and down motion in the connector when it's in the seat. When we tried to prime our car for the first time, we found that this connector was a little loose, and so we reseated all of them and everything is fine. So now we're going to actually prime the turbo of the car, and it should be ready to go. And that's it. That is all it takes to prime a turbo. We just crank the motor for a couple seconds, 3 times in a row, and now we can shut off the car, reconnect the DME connector, and we are ready to start. Yep. We just gave the turbo a bit of a spool, and you'll notice there is smoke coming off the turbo. That is totally normal. When you machine these metal fittings, there is oil that is used to produce the metal parts, and that has to be burned off the only way, by the heat of the turbo and the heat of the engine. So do not be surprised if it smells bad, if it looks bad with a little bit of white or bluish smoke coming off the runners or even the turbo itself. That'll go away after after about 10 days of driving or less if you drive it hard.
All right, to do the coolant bleed on the system, I'll show you guys it right here. So right now my car normally stays in auto for the lights. You got to put on the low beams, turn on your hazards, pull the parking brake, and then 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, put into diagnostic mode. All right, and then
Heater temp to maximum.
your temp to maximum.
Lower to lowest speed.
Low speed on the blower. There you go. 84, 84, lowest speed.
And hold the accelerator pedal down. Do not touch brake for 10 seconds.
All right. Accelerator pedal down.
Service function started on the dash.
3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Last step, release gas pedal, and now we actually start the engine. Service function started. We got it. Now you just leave it for about 15 minutes, and it will go through the coolant setup there, and it will bleed the system. Yeah. Interesting. This is what it sounds like when it's doing its system. Oh, you can hear a little bit. Yeah. You can hear the turbo. You can hear T51R. You can hear it. Heck yeah. When it is done, you'll see the RPMs drop to just under 1,000. So it'll drop down to straight up idle, and you'll know your car is ready to go. Last thing you're gonna do before getting it down is you're gonna come under and just check, make sure no leaks. Everything's good to go, no oil, no coolant, everything's great.
So you want to hear what T51R sounds like? Let's try.